So you both have done wonderful research in wonderful places over decades, and I'm sure you have a lot of highs. But what are some of the hardships, like the difficulties in finding crews and researchers that have this experience, from like recruiting to actually making sure people are capable to go into the field and like fulfill this expedition, the results that you need to find?
I think we could talk all day about this because, and that's a question we often get. Like, well, what about safety? And we really put as many guardrails as possible when we're in the field. And I'll give you a couple examples. So any crew that I take into the wild are required to take a 16-hour wilderness first aid class, which by no means is going to transform anybody into a doctor, but I think it teaches them enough that now they become aware of the danger more than anything else. So that's one thing that we do. We always stick together. We really work hard on having a positive attitude, because what you learn in being far away is that it's going to be hard. We're telling these stories, and but it's all in hindsight. When you're living it and you're stuck in the mud up to your armpits for hours, it's no fun. And if you start complaining about it and whining, it makes everybody in a worse place. And so there's a lot of just kind of learning through these experiences and how to turn them into something. I don't want to say positive because that's impossible, but just turning the experience into a communal experience. I think like you have to fence for yourself, and almost in a survival way sometimes in the Amazon, where you feel like you're part of the food chain, but also you become very aware of everybody else around you and how you might want to help them or how they might need you, and there's no words exchanged oftentimes. You just know, like, there's an instinct almost to be in nature but also be in with people in nature. I know I'm only partly answering your question, but I think to me that's what comes to mind the most is like, how do you make up of any situation and how do you make it work through? And yeah, the students are not prepared. Most of them, they're absolutely not prepared to that. And they tell me, like, yeah, if I knew this was the trip that I signed up for, maybe I wouldn't have come. But you know what? I'm so happy that I'm here because, I've overcome all my fears, I've pushed so many new limits. And yeah, so I mean, I think for me, I open the door and I keep them alive. And then they need to come, make do their part and meet me there. Yeah.
Do you have, and this is a little less extreme, but do you have in class or, pre-expedition bonding sessions just to create that sense of community before you go out into a place where you kind of really need to rely on each other?
It depends. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do a little camping trip or even just like a couple, like the 16-hour wilderness. Usually we try to do it as a group. And so we meet there and I organize lunches and places. And, I bring my gear and I say, this is what I bring with me. And I make them, feel it, touch it, ask all the questions. We get, and also when we go into the field, it's not day one we're thrown in the field. So there's many days of acclimation, whether for high elevation or just for the tropical overwhelming humidity, or, so we do smaller hikes and shorter activities so that we all get to know each other. And yeah, so that's how we do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sure that acclimation period is necessary for knowing each other and also just knowing yourself. Yep. In case something happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So I like to say to my students that, the field is to me an intellectual seedbed, but it's also a personal incubator. So, like you will learn a lot about yourself emotionally, physically when you're in the field because you're separated from all the comfort that you're already are usually used to. And you really are going to have to rely on your instincts and also the others with you and build a trust that maybe you've never had with other people before.
Yeah. What a gift.
If
all goes well.
I think it's amazing. But yeah, of course, there's always the possibility that things don't go as well as you hope.
Yeah. Similarly, do you have any words of wisdom or difficulties, something that you'd like to share on just how to gather a crew that can climb Everest?
Well, I think just circling back to something Julie said about how important just a positive kind of attitude and just infectious enthusiasm can be with groups and teams. It's just there's going to be challenges, and especially the places where we work, it's going to be cold. It's going to be at altitude. It just magnifies those challenges because it's hard to sleep. It's just you're not feeling well, and it's remote. It's connectivity is a challenge. So having teams and team members that are willing to work together and just maintain a certain degree of positivity under the most challenging circumstances goes so far, and that's a big quality I look for in team members, and certainly for the places that I work, fitness and just previous field experience is so important. And if we're working on glaciers or going up high, you've got to have the technical experience with crampons, ice axe, mountaineering, and that familiarity and safety component as well. But yeah, the challenges are just there are so many, and we can't getting weather stations up to some of the places where we work. It's all human power. I mean, helicopters only fly up to about 21,000 feet, so they can help in some cases up to a certain point. There are no helicopters that routinely operate in the Andes of Peru and Bolivia at those places, so that's all been human power. But these places are remote too, and so expeditions are long. It takes a long time to get there, and that translates into just a lot of time away from the office and from family, and that takes a toll. I mean, there's incredible data that we bring back, but from an efficiency standpoint, I think we could be a lot more productive in that sense by using existing data sets and publishing papers from that. But there's something so valuable about going to the field and learning, as Julie was talking about. You see things just completely differently. And for students to have those experiences, it's just, you can't even compare it with a classroom, traditional classroom environment when they're out there feeling the effects of altitude, seeing glaciers and glacier change up close, bringing back a peat core. It's stuff that you just can't replicate in the classroom. And the students, I mean, I've been taking students to the Andes since 2000, and they are life-changing experiences where people are really transformed. I mean, it's not easy, and they're frequently pushed to their breaking point. But from an educational perspective, it's just eye-opening, and just a personal growth perspective too. It's so transformative, and so those are just a few, I guess, comments, observations I would make on that.
I'll add to this. I remember the trip in the Andes we did together, and he had 15 students from his university, and I had 15 from mine, and we had, of course, the families who lived there who helped us carry our gear and so much more. And some students, they for 8 full days were trekking. There's no bathroom, no electricity. It's 10 Fahrenheit every night, and 60 during the day, and we're hiking all day long. No internet, of course, none of that. And I thought, these kids were born with internet at their fingertips. What are they gonna do? Yeah. And it was amazing to see how they got close together. And at the end, they didn't want to sleep in their own tents. We all slept in the big classroom tent because they just loved to be together so much. But what I wanted to say is that the coping mechanism for different students was different. Mm-hmm. Some of them, I remember one of my students, she, imagine this, we're 17,000 feet, again, no bathroom, right? It's like just so rugged. She would put on her full-on makeup every morning because I think for her it was like, this is me, this is how I like to be. And she was just preparing for her day, and that was probably her own personal time that she had to do her thing. And some people would go to, sit down by a rock, look at the landscape, or maybe bring their own music with them and, tiny solar panels we had. It was just so that they could have a little bit of energy, so they could listen to their own music, to just to cope, to be okay with the moments that were harder. And so those are often the stories we don't talk about. And we also have our own, which, I struggle many times in those trips. Nobody knows. But it's hard. It's hard to be far. It's hard to be isolated. It's hard to take care of everybody and making sure everybody's okay. There's so many hard things about those trips. And then making sure the science gets done, of course. And that, to me, it's like, how do you teach the instinct to explore and discover to other people? That's kind of my secret mission in those trips, and it's really hard to do. And you can't say, go sit there and read a poem. Like if you force it, obviously it wouldn't work. So how do you want people to keep doing what you do, and how do they find their own way in nature and feel, I don't know about comfortable, but feel like they belong there and they love it and they want more. And some of them, they get it like right away, and others, it's just a whole journey. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly have been students that, I have one that comes to mind who, just was totally into snow and bragged about how he, slept with his windows open back in Boone and in the winter and just loved the cold. Well, we took him to 16,000 feet, and he's in that environment the whole time, and he, it hit him hard, and like, this is very different than what I had imagined, and it was a challenge. I mean, he made it through the trip, but for some people, there is a realization like, okay, I'm glad I did that, but I don't think I want to do that again. But it still helps them push these personal boundaries about what they're capable of, and gives them this appreciation for the people that live there, especially, and work in these places day in, day out. I mean, so Julie and I both worked on the land of one of the highest permanent inhabitants in the world. Don Pedro Godfredo lives at 16,700 feet, okay, and has 1,000 alpaca up there. And I mean, just the hardships of just the climate and altitude that he goes through are just phenomenal. And, we're just there for a few days to speak of, and students are totally pushed their limits. So it definitely, these experiences certainly expand their horizons as to what life is like in these places as